They took the little wooden sign I carved for my wife, and 5 minutes later, one of the HOA security SUVs slammed into a state trooper's car on that same blind curve. I watched from my porch as glass and metal folded like paper, and suddenly the thing they called visual cohesion looked a whole lot like culpability. I'm Mark Turner, and this is how a piece of cedar and a stubborn heart became the thing that split our neighborhood in two. I live at the edge of Willow Creek on Oak Ridge Road, a county curve so tight it reads like a fishhook on a map. The county never put a warning there. Budgets and priorities march on without asking the people who lose sleep over the bend. 7 years ago, Emily was coming home from a night shift at the hospital. The rain was doing that slow, slippery work that makes every steering correction feel like a dare, and she didn't make it. I didn't need a report to know what happened. I'd watched that curve flirt with disaster my whole life. So I built a sign. Not fancy cedar weather-sealed, hand-painted, dangerous, curve, slow down. I set the post 2 feet deep, set the concrete, and at 10 years old my son Ethan held the flashlight like he knew this mattered more than any school project. For years it worked. People slowed. Delivery drivers waved. Neighbors thanked me. It felt like doing something that mattered, like keeping a promise. Then the HOA boundaries shifted, and suddenly I'm inside Willow Creek's jurisdiction, whether I ask to be or not. A month later, a thick envelope with a silver leaf logo showed up in my mailbox. Violation of Meadow Creek Visual Standards Unauthorized Roadside Signage. The letter read like a polite guillotine. They gave me 14 days. I called, I emailed, I sat through 90 minutes of meeting minutes about pool cards and lawn heights and a woman complaining about Halloween lights in February. And when I finally got the floor, I put a photograph of Emily on the table. The twisted wreck, the coroner's date stamped the truth. President Karen Miller folded her hands and mouthed the sympathetic script, "We're so sorry." And then in that same breath, we have to uphold our standards. Brad Wilson, the treasurer, smirked like he was telling a private joke about rules and order. They voted 5-0 to keep the violation. I sent a formal appeal with police reports, eyewitness statements, email from the county that admitted the curve was higher risk. I did everything someone who knows how to read crash metrics does when they can't stand the idea of another name on a headstone. Appeal denied. Final notice. If you do not remove the sign, HOA crews will remove it and charge your account. I should have chained myself to the post. I didn't. I paced the porch, feeling the old precise weight of grief and the new, colder weight of bureaucracy. On June 3rd at 9:06 a.m., the maintenance crew pulled up. I was upstairs fixing a handle when Ethan shouted. I ran out barefoot. The man with the pry bar looked at me like he was doing his job. He jerked the concrete crack, the post came loose, and they tossed the sign in the truck like junk wood. 5 minutes later, 5 minutes, the sound of tires, a horn, glass. I saw smoke. I saw a white HOA security SUV crumpled into the side of a dark sedan. And for a second the world narrowed to the awful clarity of cause and effect. The HOA issued an email that morning. We regret a vehicular accident involving our security personnel. Unauthorized signage may have contributed to confusion. The phrasing was surgical, unauthorized confusion, a legal pivot that said everything and nothing. They'd removed the warning and then blamed the person who'd warned. I sat on my porch holding a clipboard of photocopies and a boiled emptiness in my throat. For a while, I wanted to disappear the way you want to forfeit a game when the rules are stacked. At night, I opened the old file. Emily's accident photos, the county's letters, dashcam clips, and for the first time since the funeral, I wondered if I'd been wrong. Had I made things worse by putting my homemade sign where the board said only official signage could be? Was I selfish? It was a dark, small place to be, where doubt eats at the edges of conviction. Ethan found me there and said quietly, "Dad, she'd want you to try." That's when the sentence inside me that said, "Give up," snapped. I called Greg Martin, a retired crash analyst I used to work with, and Teresa Wong, a civil engineer who still does road safety work pro bono sometimes. Greg came over with a field kit and a drone as if we were going back into a battlefield. We measured sight lines, mapped reaction time, captured aerials comparing before and after. Teresa ran models and said the numbers plain with my sign there were reaction time. Increased drivers had those 4 extra seconds that keep things from becoming headlines. Without it, the margin dropped. I took all of it and walked it into the state patrol office. That's when Sergeant Mike Keller, the man in the black sedan, answered my call. He was bruised and pissed and not interested in HOA politics. He was interested in what happened on the road. He took the USB with the footage and he promised to write a sworn statement. That statement turned the tide. The HOA didn't like being cornered. Their first move was lawyers, a certified letter from Whitmore and Glassman accusing me of creating a hazard, demanding thousands in damages, the usual modern version of a bully's paper cut. I could have folded. Instead, I pushed. I collected board meeting minutes obtained under public records, minutes where they discussed the bend and explicitly decided not to pursue signage because HOA responsibility does not extend to county roads. I gathered neighbor statements, a woman who'd watched her son flip a bike near that curve, a delivery driver who'd slowed the night, my sign was there, and I labeled everything Exhibit A, B, C. I gave a copy to a local reporter, Cynthia Tran. The camera lights made my throat dry, but what she aired put names and faces to the pattern the HOA knew they chose uniformity over warnings, and when someone refused to be silent, they retaliated. For a while, it felt like the whole town had split down the middle. People whispered at mailboxes. Emails moved like currents. Some called me a hero. Others accused me of attention-seeking. There was a point, a terrible honest point, where the HOA's legal storms and the exhaustion of relitigating grief made me think maybe the easier road was to pay the fines, move the sign to a shelf, and pretend I'd learned a lesson about not poking the hornet's nest. But then, Sergeant Keller's affidavit went to the DA. Teresa's risk analysis landed with traffic enforcement. Greg handed over his drone metadata. The pre-litigation package we submitted was thick enough to make anyone look. The real cracking moment came when the community could no longer be kept quiet. At a packed HOA meeting, people told their stories out loud near Mrs. Unanswered Letters fines levied for trivial things. Brad Wilson showed up at my door later with a hat in his hands and a look that wasn't smug anymore. He said, "We were just following protocol. Karen pushed for uniformity." I said, "You removed a warning that saved lives." He didn't have an answer. They called a special referendum to keep or remove the current leadership, and the vote cascaded like an avalanche. Karen Miller was ousted. Brad resigned. The board's armor turned brittle. In court, Rachel Vance, the lawyer who took the case, did what honest litigators do. She laid the timeline out exhibit by exhibit, and she didn't let them hide behind policy. The dashcam played. The drone footage split-screened before and after. The minutes showed knowledge. Karen's removal order was time-stamped right before the crash. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. The DA opened a review, and the settlement that followed wasn't a victory lap. It was a recognition HOA funds to install proper county-approved signage on Oak Ridge, rescinding of fines, a public apology, and the formation of an independent safety committee that invited me to be an advisor. The last image I want you to have isn't confetti. It's the 2 workers bolting down a regulation reflective sign where my little piece of cedar once stood. Below it, a small plaque, in memory of Emily Turner. I stood with Ethan watching no cheering, just a light wind, and a very private, very deep relief. Karen left the neighborhood. Brad wrote an apology, later handwritten, short, honest. "You were right. I was scared. I'm not naive. HOAs will always have rules and people who want order, but rules without heart are tyranny in grass skirts. You can push back. You can gather proof. You can make the bureaucrats accountable. And sometimes a man who refuses to be quiet is the only thing standing between a blind curve and another life lost. Remember, rules are for people, not the other way around.